Welcome, everybody, to the Depths of Motherhood podcast. This is a special season dedicated to the tribe of the mother. But also, I know any mothers listening will find this extremely valuable. I've created each episode to offer simple, digestible, and supportive information, which I hope will educate and inspire anyone who listens. So, this is by popular demand. Please help us to educate and support the tribe holding the mother. Look forward to passionate and highly knowledgeable guests dedicated to reclaiming the essence of birth and embracing conscious parenting. Throughout our time together, our guests will serve as the guiding voices, illuminating the path towards a deeper understanding of preconception, pregnancy, birth, and postpartum. This is with the mother and the baby being the center of the exploration. In the show notes, you'll discover the link to Nourish Mother package, which will offer many different resources to complement each episode. This is free for all members in the Women's Circle, or £33 for everybody who just wants to purchase the package. A heartfelt thank you to our incredible guests and immense gratitude to my partner for supporting me on this creation. And finally, last but not least, special thank you to Araya, my daughter, for being the endless well of inspiration. Welcome back, everybody. Today we are joined by Melissa Boyles, the founder of Rise and Bloom. Melissa's been on the podcast before to share her birth story, so I will be putting that in the show notes so you can have a listen. I've been following Melissa and her journey for a while now, and I always feel so deeply nourished when I tune in to her energy and what she's bringing to the world. And I love seeing her post pop up on social media because they always bring a softness and a reminder for me to come back to my body and just to take a bigger perspective of what is happening. Melissa learned so much from really dropping into the 40-day rest period after she gave birth. And that created shifts in her own life and her family's life, and really ignited this passion to support others in their journey with conception, birth, and postpartum. And now she guides women and families through the process of trusting their body's wisdom and intuition and offering trauma-informed and integrative care. In this conversation, we're holding space for the newborn and the delicate dance between the mother and baby's nervous system and expanding that out to the whole family. Melissa shares her insights on how to hold space for a crying baby, how to honor where we're at to support our own nervous system regulation, which in turn will support the baby's. We'll look at how to approach sleep and feeding rhythms with gentleness and connection. And we'll also hold space for the father or the non-birthing parent to see how their role plays such an important part in these times. We also drop into elimination communication, which I only heard from Melissa. I didn't try it myself, but Melissa has used it with her children, and she is sharing how this really supported her children and her family in so many ways. We'll be looking at how to create a nurturing environment that extends that feeling of the womb into everyday life. Melissa really guides us on a journey with this conversation and guides us through practical considerations like integrating siblings and mindful shopping lists. And we're really looking at the whole family, the family dynamics, fears that can influence decisions, how we can have the mother and the baby in the center, but everyone is taken care of and nourished. So whether you're navigating the newborn phase or supporting someone who is, this episode comes as a warm reminder that parenting can be led from curiosity, connection, and our intuition. So we're really stepping away from that structured, linear way of parenting that many of these parenting books offer us when we are looking into sleep and nourishing our children. We might have heard it as sleep scheduling or feeding schedule, and really we're breaking that down to see, well, what does that really mean? And biologically, how can we support ourselves and our baby during this time so that we are all nourished and we drop into that natural, innate rhythm? You can find all Melissa's details in the show notes, and Melissa offers hands-on, hands-in pelvic care, body wisdom prenatal programs, individual birth services, stepping into motherhood, which is a 3-part journey for healing and integrating. She offers flower essence salves and herbal blends, which she is wild foraging for. And she also offers prenatal and mother-baby yoga. Massive thank you to Melissa. When we recorded this, which was nearly a year ago, she was pregnant and I felt so honored to have her and a baby in this space while we were creating this season. So thank you so much, Melissa. I love you. Now in Women's Circle Online, we are joining in February from the 14th till the 16th to go deeper into sensuality. So we'll be exploring what it means to awaken through our senses and why we would want to do that, and also how to be gentle with ourselves as we do start to come back, start to awaken. So these 3 days is about reflecting deeply on this topic, letting it unravel. We'll be connecting for one live, which is on the 15th, and then the 16th is a recording again to really integrate everything that we have explored through a somatic practice. This is free or by donation. You can find the link in the show notes. All right, let's take a deep breath. And as you welcome that breath in, guide your awareness inside your body and welcome some soft movements, just to notice if you are holding any unnecessary tension in the body, that with a bit of loving awareness and gentle breath, we can soften and open. Notice the next breath come in, and as we soften to be here, opening that heart space to come to receive. Thank you so much for being here. Today, we welcome Melissa onto the show. Welcome, Melissa.
Thank you for having me. It feels so good.
We were just trying to work out how long it's been like just over a year since we did a recording, which is funny because it feels like it feels longer because we've been in touch since then all the time, following each other's journey.
Yeah.
So I'm like, oh, I feel like I've known you longer than that. But no, a year with so much happening in between. And
Yeah.
you have a new guest arrive. Well, someone's coming soon. Your little guest is coming. So you want to share?
My little guest is coming. Yeah, I'm about halfway through expecting my third baby.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah, so he or she are here with us. And yeah, hopefully that wisdom will also help come through with the babe here, feeling the kicks and the flips and
Yeah, they'll be
all the
reminding you.
movement.
They'll say, hey, remember to say that. They need to know this. Kick in the
Don't
rib.
forget this little wisdom. Yeah.
I'm really excited to get into today's conversation because it is one that's been asked about a lot in our community, of talking about how to care for a newborn. And so this season is dedicated to the tribe, the community of the mother. So the conversation we're going to have today, the questions that we're going to go into, are all about understanding a newborn, understanding how to be there, hold space for them, and what would be best for them in the moments when they're going through stuff, or when they're asking for help in their own way.
Yeah,
So
it's such a topic has evolved for me, over the years. I have a almost 7-year-old and an almost 4-year-old. It's really just a big topic that I feel passionate about. And I added this to my prenatal program, that before it was birth prep and now it's birth and mother baby prep, because I feel like we spend so much, and postpartum was initially what got me into birth work, this passion for caring for mothers and attuning to the baby. And so the more I learn, the more I realize how much we women feel so comfortable investing in preparing for birth. And then the baby comes and it's like, oh, what now? And I think, gosh, there's so many opinions in pregnancy, but I wonder if women and families experience just this huge influx of opinions and guidance during the postpartum period, maybe even more. It's just there's so much confusion and so much disconnect. So being part of weaving that together has felt really, really powerful and really fulfilling for me too, to work with women and families in that capacity in this space.
that's so beautiful. And I just imagine these pillars, holding this family up, and caring for the newborn isn't one of them that I've really gone into so much. It's been more from just what I've been learning from pregnancy prep and postpartum, and kind of the wisdom from that's rippled into caring for the newborn. But I hadn't really taken any time to fully understand the physiological needs of the baby. And like you said, where there's that space, then there's loads of opinions that can also move into that space. And when mothers are in this time of healing and just wanting to rest, it would be really nice just to have
this information to share with the people around them so that they get a heads up and they can fully step into the role of caring for the newborn as well while the mama takes some rest.
Yeah, absolutely.
So let's start off with crying baby. Oh, the baby's come outside and he has his beautiful tears. And sometimes
Mm,
they're coming all the time.
hmm
Sometimes they're loud, sometimes they're these silent cries. But what would you say to the families that have this beautiful new little human and they're crying and they won't stop?
Yeah. And I have experienced this firsthand. And there was so many, maybe I can take you a bit through my journey because there was just so much so many dots that I wasn't connecting. Like that the birth, that he experienced the birth story, that it was my birth story, but actually it was our birth story. And so I think if we as a collective made more of a conscious just awareness, an effort to have a conscious awareness around what the mother experiences in pregnancy and birth and early postpartum, that the baby is also experiencing this as well. And I think for a long time, there's just been a big disconnect around that. And so, yeah, I think babies cry for all sorts of different reasons, but I feel that in my experience, this is what you would have called colic, this was my firstborn, this constant crying, and the breast would not soothe him. I tried many different pacifiers, wouldn't soothe him. We rocked him. It was just a certain time of night, like what some people consider this witching hour. And I think my daughter did experience this to some extent, just this evening fussiness, but not to the extent, not this inconsolable crying, arching of the back, and me feeling so completely alone and distraught. So I think a few things would have helped me during that time that I know now and that I would recommend to mothers. And it's that a new mother, in those first 6 months, but especially the first 6 weeks, that she shouldn't be alone with her infant at night. Because I just happened to be in a situation where my husband, my partner at the time, was working evenings. He worked at a restaurant doing bar management, and I was in a foreign country. And so I didn't really know anybody. I didn't speak the mother tongue of the country. And there were so many benefits of being in this country. And there was just this drawback of feeling quite isolated. And I think new mothers, the feeling of isolation that can come with crying. Like if I could have just handed the baby to him or to someone for even 30 minutes, because nothing would console him. It would be one thing if the breast could console the baby, but nothing would. So, yeah, I didn't feel right just to leave him there crying, but then I also could feel that I was totally becoming dysregulated with all of the crying. So I think planning to never be alone with your infant if possible, whether that's having friends over or planning for hired help. Now, I think it was as soon as I found out I was pregnant, we already started hiring postpartum help. So I don't even have a midwife, but I have a postpartum practitioner coming, and we've already started paying her. So it's just been something that's part of our monthly budget now since I was 2 months pregnant. Because we're just not fucking around with the third baby. It's just, you don't, yeah, it's a shame that sometimes it takes 3 babies in to make that decision. But yeah, I would say for one, to care for the mother, to make sure that she's held, to make sure that she's fed, to understand that the baby is speaking his or her story. And inconsolable babies is incredibly overwhelming. There's no need to feel like that you shouldn't be feeling this way, or I shouldn't be overwhelmed by this. I should be able to handle this. Like really understanding that that actually is a very overwhelming sensation when a baby is crying and won't stop crying. But if your baby doesn't have colic, I would say, just give them the breast. This is usually the most soothing thing. And this is, of course, what soothed my daughter, who had a very smooth and beautiful birth. If I look at my nervous system, now that I've learned so much about the nervous system, if I look at who I was when I was pregnant with my son and then postpartum with my son, the terrain is totally, totally different than with my daughter. And you can see that in their own nervous systems and how they are and were as babies. So that's also a really big connection that's a thread that will be woven through the entire day, I imagine, or
Mm,
our entire talk.
wow. The way that you just like brought this conversation in settles my nervous system and reminds me of that deep connection with the baby coming through, which is not always spoken about, of this
Mm,
experience. And it's interesting because we celebrate their birthday, but then we forget that they were also involved in their birthday.
yeah,
Like they also
right.
had that. And yeah, it makes me think about like when Araya was crying, sometimes she wouldn't be soothed by the breast, but Elan had this mindset that she always needs to be with me. And that got me
Mm,
to a point where I was just inside wanting to escape because my go to in a situation where I don't feel safe is to run away, but I couldn't. So instead, I'm like trapped inside my body, knowing that I should be there, but not wanting to be there at the same time. Then having these feelings of guilt because I'm very aware that she's feeling me, that we're the same like thing right now. We're sharing the same nervous system. And so I wonder if you could just add on to that about, like it's okay to give it's
do
okay to
it.
give the mothers a break. Like it's okay if the mother needs some time. Like if you are a safe space for that child, they will start to feel safe with you, even though, yes, there is that deep connection to the mother, but just having someone there so the mum can have a break and then fully be with them once she's had a breather. Because there's a reason that it affects our nervous system the way that it does. Like them cries are the baby's communication with us. So
Mm.
it makes sense. And I think I read something that mothers do receive these cries in a much different way than fathers do. Do you know anything about that?
Well, I can say personally that, yeah, for sure. And I would even experience like bodily sensation. Like I remember if my son was crying the way he was, and I never experienced this with my daughter. So I would just also venture into it's so important to go back to the birth and to see how each baby chose to come in and where I was at just mentally with each baby. But I remember when my son would have these cries, I would have like a physical hot flash. Like I would have this sweating, my body would start sweating. I would need to start taking off clothes. Like when he was crying, I would have a physical response, and my husband didn't experience this. And I would say, just to, again, just piggyback onto it's okay for mothers to take a break. And I would say in the first 40 days, I wouldn't recommend that the mother, go and get like a Starbucks drive-through coffee or anything like this. But I would say that my son, after breastfeeding, after having his belly full, he always was more calm with my husband because he was more calm, of course. And he could get into this sway with him. I have videos of it, of him swaying and singing these Peruvian songs that he sang and that he learned in the jungle, and just like connecting with him. Like he could really just like tap into his infant and in a way that I was so dysregulated that I couldn't, so it's actually, I think, so important, not just important for the mother, but also important for the infant to have someone who is regulated, that mom's not so far away. Like I didn't disappear. I didn't leave for days at a time or hours at a time. I was just in the other room, so of course I was available if anybody needed me, but suddenly someone else could ground him, and in a way that I felt like I wasn't able to in the moment because I was so imbalanced in those moments.
Wow.
So yeah, I think it's really important actually for the father to be there and for him to, that imagine the empowerment that my husband got from that other fathers who are, always told like you're not doing it right, this isn't the right way, you're not doing it correctly, like constantly sort of criticized for how they're doing or how they're interacting with their infant. This for him has set a really good foundation for him as a father. And I
Mm,
know we'll talk more about the father's role also
yeah.
throughout
I
our
feel like we could
talk,
talk
but
for
I can see
hours
that was,
because
yeah,
it
that
brings
was
up
good for
so
him.
much. It's so woven in everything. Like
Mm,
even as you say that, I remember I spoke to Deborah from Orgasmic Birth, and she offered a meditation which was to heal the birth story, but it was to, well, for me, I took Araya into the bath because I really wanted a water birth, which I never had. And I took her into the bath with me, and I just imagined birthing her again. And like, this was a time when she
Mm,
was having real struggles. Like, we were all having struggles with our nervous system and her sleeping. And like, she was just, it was getting a lot. And I did this meditation in the bath with her and I imagined birthing her. And for the first time, she fell to sleep on my chest without the breast. And it was just a
mm,
beautiful, beautiful moment. And I'm feeling like even now she's 3, I could do that meditation with her again. There's something happening right now where I feel like there's a little bit of regression work that we could do together. And for
mm.
me, it was a really, wow, I cried so much after doing that. So much got healed and so much was seen for us. So
Yeah, totally.
let's go
I
on
love
to
that.
the sleeping patterns, because this is all kind of it's a newborn. It's like sleeping, eating, it's all in together. But with a newborn, is there a typical sleep pattern that we would be witnessing? Is there any need for a sleep schedule? What's your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I would say I had a yoga teacher when I was pregnant with my son, a Kundalini yoga teacher. And I remember there was something that she said that really stuck with me. And she said, if you're wondering how often to feed your baby, because I know that like sleep schedules and feeding schedules tend to, we see these play hand in hand in the modern world. And she said, if you're, I wasn't curious about how often to feed my baby, but I was so glad that she had said this because I never witnessed really anyone breastfeeding regularly. I remember the first couple times I saw a woman breastfeeding, and it was, obviously very, for me, it was really unusual. It wasn't something I was used to seeing. And so she had said, if you're wondering how often to breastfeed your baby, just whenever they ask for it, whenever they're calling out for it. And babies are so just they tell you right there, when they're waking up in the night, if they're right there next to you, which is their natural place to be with the mother, right there next to the mother, because their nervous systems are so interconnected, because the mother is their terrain, then they don't even have to cry. The mother will just wake up to the baby like I can just see it now, like a little infant just rocking its head back and forth, and like a little fish in the water, just like looking for the nipple, just back and forth, back and forth. And it's only after a baby would have to be doing that for a really long time to actually begin wailing, which of course might happen if you have a baby in another room with a monitor. And then the baby has now gotten, his or herself so upset that then to try to breastfeed in that moment is, of course, much more difficult and dysregulating for everybody, because then the mother is like kind of freaking out because the baby's freaking out. And so, yeah, I would say to when the baby is as close to mom as possible, and when the husband also knows to, or the partner or the mother in law or whoever's there helping knows that that's what the mother wants when the baby cues for the breast, then that means bring the baby to me. Or when the mother can just see, like the baby's rooting, pecking, pecking, pecking. I mean, the baby makes very obvious desires for the breast, then to give the baby the breast right away. Not to be like, oh, well, actually, your feeding time is in 20 minutes and you just woke up. Or, there's so many things that we can get our heads wrapped around, like, but wait, I thought it was supposed to be every 3 hours. Or, we can really just throw ourselves off with that. But if we just look at the baby and listen to the baby, we can really tune in to what they're doing. And of course, after some time, you'll start to see that the baby will get in a flow. You're like, oh, okay, so around mid morning, every morning, the baby seems to be tired and wanting for me to lay down with the baby and to nurse. And then they usually fall asleep. And then when they wake up, I notice that they're making that movement again to have the breast when they wake up. I think, and again, this was something that I noticed when I was working with women, which is exactly why I created this body wisdom prenatal. Because when a woman is so disconnected from her own body, which is what I kept seeing, I was thinking like you can learn as many facts and figures and stats and numbers and all of this as you want. But then if a woman is so disconnected from her body, how could she possibly tune in and attune to her infant's body's cues? And then we could go even deeper and say, how many women have even held a baby or changed a baby's diaper or been around an infant for a certain number of time in the modern world, in America, in the West, before having a baby themselves? I was so lucky to be a nanny for many, many years and to babysit kids for so many years. This is just set this really strong foundation for at least experiencing an inconsolable baby. Like my sister's daughter, for example, she was very, very fussy. She required a lot of rocking, a lot of holding. She used to love when I would take her out on the, I remember her, she would just be crying, 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 crying. And I would open the front door and take her to the porch swing and she would stop. It was like it muted her, somehow. And I was just like, that's just what she needs. Sometimes you just got to get creative, every kid. But there was something about her getting fresh air. And it's so true because my sister, about the coming back to the moment of the cries affecting other people differently, her cries bothered me, but I wasn't having like sweating. I wasn't having a physical sweating reaction. I was just like, okay, I was in a place of being rested for one, because I wasn't with her at night, and being able to come up with a creative solution of, oh, fresh air, rocking chair in the front yard, and then that would soothe her. And so she had her aunt to be there as that person. And, I know her now. Now she's 8 years old, and I can look at her and say, I used to rock you, you little fussy thing, to sleep. Now she's sleeping through the night and goes to bed on her own and has her own friends and even sleeps over sometimes at other people's houses. So I think that can be another perspective, that having a history of childcare, which I so, recommend young girls have that exposure, and women that are wanting to conceive, to be able to be around kids and babies, to know like, oh, this is how they are now, and I see them 4 years later, and like, this is going to pass. Like, there
Yeah.
was something about knowing now, and I think that helped me with my daughter, my son, seeing him already so big, such a big boy off my breast, eating big boy food, taking to my husband, like getting hurt and crying and going to my husband before going to me, which he never would have done, before. So being able to see the evolution can
Mm.
put everything in such a perspective. And of course, every little old elderly person wants to say, oh, cherish the time, it's going to pass. So I don't mean to say it like that, because it can be a bit, that cannot be helpful sometimes. That can be a bit counterintuitive, but to see the continuum, to see the path is helpful.
I love that you added that because there is this trust that comes. Like I remember somebody saying to me, "Oh, you need to teach her how to speak this way," because everyone was concerned because Araya wasn't speaking when she was 2 years old. And my partner's sister is like a speech and language therapist. So she would be like, don't say this, do this. And I'm like, oh my gosh. And then suddenly she turns 2.5 and she speaks. She's curious. She wants to read. Children are curious, whether that's them evolving away from the breast or sleeping alone or crawling or walking. They're curious. They're going to do that. That's part of being a human. And like you
Mm,
said there, witnessing mothers, babies growing up, you start to learn from experience, and that trust comes like every baby is different. How can we be creative, like you said? And how can we trust? Like, I trust your journey. And also at the same
mm,
time, be so connected to intuition when something maybe is off and seeing how well, how can I
mhm,
support them in a different way? I feel like I got to the point, like, I don't know how the listeners are or where they're at in the journey, but I was at a point where I'd focused so much on pregnancy, on the birth, on my own postpartum care, that I'd really like missed something when it came to tuning into the baby and their needs. And so I started looking at sleep scheduling, feed scheduling. And there was even a point after I was born, I was expressing breast milk to give to Elan to give me a break, but I wasn't getting a break because I was expressing milk. So the best thing for me to do would have just been to lie down to give her my breast. But I was so tied into my maiden ways where I was like, I have my business online. I still have to do this. I've heard that if you sleep schedule, then everything will just fit into place. And it's only now I see. And honestly, I carry like I have emotions like running at the same time, but I there's a guilt and then there's like a
mhm.
forgiveness, like there's two things
Yeah.
happening because there's like I didn't know and I was trying my best, but now I
Mm,
see things so differently. And it's you said something in the beginning, like, why does it take getting to the third one? But that's just the way it is sometimes as it unfolds. Because even though we can tune into our body, we can listen. It sometimes takes a few tries to actually understand the language of our body and the baby, and that's okay because
Hmm.
we're literally like we're remembering and we're coming
Yeah.
back to our roots. Like we're literally peeling back all these layers that have been told to us about what it means to be a mother or what it means to raise a baby. So if you're listening, you're doing just great. Like just let's all breathe. We're trying our best, and the information will come. And I think our babies, they can handle it. Like your
Mm.
first will have different care than the third coming through. And they asked for that in some way, whatever that means. They
Hmm.
came through for that. So it's part of their calling. Now, we were talking a little bit about the dads. So let's call them in again, or the partner. And how do you feel that they can step into being being the parent? Because I know for Elon, he wanted to be there, but he was also afraid that he was taking Araya away from me. He didn't know the best way. He tried his best, like he did amazing. Yet there was some things that there was missing because he wasn't brought up around children. So it's like these fathers wanting, or these partners wanting to show up. Like, what's your advice? What's your top tips?
Yeah, I would say I could share a story about this. My husband now has a friend. My husband is from Estonia, which is this very small country in North Europe. And he has a friend also from Estonia visiting now who has really close ties with the Lakota and different native tribes in America, it's a really long story that I could go quite deep in, which could be a whole podcast in itself. But at the end of the day, there was two Estonians in the 80s that were fleeing from the Soviet Union in Estonia because Estonia was part of Soviet Russia. And somehow this young Estonian man on the plane, they escaped to Sweden and then ended up coming to America. He had a dream that he was going to connect with the native people of America. And so somehow this connection between Estonians and natives, the indigenous people of America, was made. And Estonia hosted this big welcoming of the tribes in Estonia. The Estonian president and the president of the US Embassy in Estonia welcomed these tribes in. And when the woman was visiting these Estonian people, she was looking at the patterns of the embroidery and how the traditions of the sweat lodge and the sauna, like the connections there. And she realized that there was a similar thread, and she saw these people, these Estonians, as relatives, that they weren't white people, as she said, because they were thinking of white people as the colonizer, but she saw them as relatives, that they were indigenous is the word that she used. And of course, every white lineage there is an indigenous wisdom, and Estonia just was able to really hold on to that. And so with that connection between Estonia and the natives, his friend Rico, who's here visiting, has gotten really connected with the native people, and he's gone out west and done several sweat lodges, and there's a connection there. And so I was asking him if he could tell me a story about men's place with these indigenous people of America, because many of the tribes were matriarch tribes. And he was saying that there was one man, Russell Means, which is a famous Lakota tribesman, and he was saying that in the first trimester of a woman's pregnancy, the father of the baby only sings to the baby. So there's like a protocol. And in the second trimester, the father sings mostly, but then talks a little bit to the baby. And in the third trimester, the singing and the talking is about equal. And in the fourth trimester, the dad is there for whatever the baby needs, aside from obviously breastfeeding the baby, because that's what the mother would do. And I found it quite fascinating, because if we think about what are the tips to give fathers to be present for their newborn, then we have to go all the way back to preconception, like it begins then, right? If we think about the presence of the father, if the baby's been hearing the father singing to him or her from the beginning, from the very beginning, then hearing Papa's song in those first 40 days and beyond, he's already established that connection with babe through the trimesters and through the time there. And so that's what I would say, is to connect with your baby now while your baby's in your partner's belly, if possible.
Oh,
And if not, then to be that grounding space, to be that space of after mom, like if we think about really practical things that I think about what my husband did, is he often just wore my baby. We had a baby carrier and I would nurse my son and then he would wear him out into the forest. And so he was fed, he was full, and then he wore him out and rocked him to sleep and walked with him. And so this rocking is now their thing. And then I remember as Ollie, my son, got older and older, my husband then would tell him stories, even before my son could speak, but he wanted the story. You could tell because even Oriah, obviously before she was talking, she was still communicating. You could see what she wanted, you could see what she needed, and she understood what you were saying. And so he would often tell him stories in all the languages that he speaks, just speak to him in Russian, speak to him in Estonian, speak to him in English, and just tell him stories as he rocked him after I breastfed him. And so, yeah, I think that, and of course, elimination communication, we're going to talk about that too, but being part of the toilet training and being part of the diaper changes and in a way that's positive, they're actually co-regulating during this process, not, ew, ooh, this is a stinky one. Which, of course, I also have learned as I say that. I don't want to think that men are so susceptible to feeling like they're doing everything wrong, that I think it is important to note that as a mother looking in, that I have every day still have to let go of what I think their relationship should look like and what I think their communication should look like. That they are going to have their relationship with their father, and it may look a little different than it is with me. My husband is much more likely to help and be part of this journey when he feels less criticized. Because when a man feels criticized, like he is some sort of failure, then he will recluse and doesn't want to be part of the journey at all because he's being criticized. I think as new moms especially can feel so hypervigilant, which just brings us right back to the nervous system, that we're so hypervigilant that nobody can do anything right. This was totally me with my son. My mom couldn't do it right. My sister couldn't do it right. And so I was so overwhelmed, but then I couldn't have any help because nobody could do it right. And so being able to let go of that a little bit and trust that your baby or your infant will have different relations with different people, as long as the mother is the primary source of comfort and care and nourishment, then I think the other people, they're not going to be perfect because nobody is, but they can be still a landing ground for the child. I think that's an important thing to mention.
I love the story and I love how you weave that into like present day, like what is happening because you reminded me of, so I have this vision, like this deluded vision of when I was in postpartum that everything was just like intense, like there was no peace in the house. Like this is like my memory. And then I was looking
Yeah.
through some videos and I just saw this 20-minute video that Elon has on his phone singing to Araya, playing the guitar. And I was like, oh my
Mm.
gosh, I'm so glad you captured that because now I remember that he used to sing to her so, so much. But because of my memories, I'm just like, I was so alone. It was just me breastfeeding, hungry and
You
tired. And I'm like, oh, maybe it
didn't do
wasn't quite
anything.
like and I also feel like
Oh.
that just raises awareness to like the pressure on the dads or the partners of having to take on all these other roles like the postpartum doula or postpartum support. Like
Mm.
when you just say that story, it's like, yeah, they also have been on this journey and need the time to settle their nervous system and get to know this little human. And like, why do they have to be the ones cooking and cleaning and all this stuff? And I know like this is ideal, right? This ideal world where we have all this support and we can maybe pay for it. Like that would be wonderful. We have to take on other roles that are not always as nourishing. But I just think telling stories of how it used to be really help to see like, well, we don't have to, we can take some pressure off of ourselves, especially like in this first year. Baby just wants to be in a safe environment, cozy, like soothing, nourished. And then the question I was going to ask you next is like, how can we create this environment for our newborns that makes them feel like they're still in the womb? Like how
Mm.
would you create that in your home?
Yeah, well, here we'll have the bedroom set up, for baby to be with me in the bed for the first 40 days and beyond, obviously. So I'll probably set up like a little toddler bed. I don't know who's listening that has older children as well, but it's quite common that once the new baby comes, the other children, of course, need more nourishment and more hands-on connection. And so I'm already imagining we'll probably put like a little twin size bed next to our king size bed that my toddler Mila can rest on, or that I can switch. I'm sure like magical beds is a thing. So you're just kind of just kind of going where you can go and sleeping where you can sleep. And so preparing the older siblings for the mother resting, I think is really important. That was a big thing that I did with my son, that I was just reminded him over and over again that when mommy has the baby, I'm going to spend several days in bed. So you bring your cars to the bed, you bring your books to the bed, and we'll connect here. And there was times where he wanted me to do something for him and I couldn't because I was resting, and it was upsetting for him, and I reminded him, remember mommy's resting, like I'm going to be back at it. And I think practical things could be like my midwife, after I gave birth to Mila, always said that whatever I'm wearing, the baby can be wearing plus one extra layer. So that creates this warmth and this coziness. And I think it's important for the mom to be eating like nourishing, warm food, like any type of ginger tea or warming tea that the mother's drinking, that will also filter through the breast milk. And that also creates this warmth and cozy, nourished feeling for the baby as well. Lots of high protein, lots of fat. So that's more of just a practical and nutritive element there that creates this warming sensation for the baby. Obviously, wearing the baby. When mother's not resting, baby can be worn by mama or papa. Yeah, I think also I have a friend who has 4 kids and she lives in a small house in rural Alabama. And I remember feeling like, I really admired how well she just trusted the strength of her baby around the older kids. Because I see so many moms really struggle with any older sibling being a bit rough with the baby. And of course, you don't want your baby to be pushed off the bed, or, a limb being like pulled out of socket or like something crazy. But truly, it was so admiring to see just how chill she was by the 4th baby, that the older kids would pick and twist and turn and, I mean, and she would just kind of watch. And at the same time, she really let the older kids comfort and be with the baby in their own like way. And I thought that was a really beautiful thing, that now, her youngest, she still tells me, I think he's 3 now, that he is just the most adored of all the siblings, because he was just this younger sibling. And I think she never made how her older kids interacted with the infant was never bad or wrong. Like it was always just, they were rough with him and they were, you know, whatever with him. And she was very relaxed about that. And I think that helps create this bond with the older siblings and the younger ones as well, that it's not constantly like gentle, 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 wait, wait, don't stop. Ah. Like every interaction with the older one. Sometimes you can see moms and you're like, okay, give them a break, give the kids a break, let them roll them around a little bit. Like babies can be, a bit tossed around. So
Yeah, it's like
yeah,
the firstborn is usually like, everyone be quiet. Like, and then the next one's it's like, okay, we're just gonna have to deal with it.
yeah.
It's
I
like
saw I
lullaby.
saw this video. Yeah, and I saw this video the other day, and it was this little toddler, and they were in Mexico, and it was a toddler, and he was just like totally passed out, just like in this layer of chair. There was like 3 chairs, set up in a row, and he was just passed out. And there was like a whole mariachi band playing like right next to him, and they were like, Hispanic babies are just built different. And I really, my husband's wife is Mexican, and I remember with my son, she was born before my son. I remember thinking, gosh, they just take that baby anywhere. They expose her to all these sounds. They keep her up so late. I was so confused by all that. But I mean, the resilience that these babies have. And I think there's a lot to do with culture there, depending on what you're going to buy your baby and how you're going to do with your baby. There's a huge cultural influence there that should be taken into account. But it's cool to see, that kid
It
just passed out.
like Araya was in Costa Rica when she was a baby, and I'd be like, okay, everything be quiet. I'm going out for a walk with her. And then like these Costa Rican mamas would just come up and be like, oh, mom.
And the bus goes by like the reggaeton coming by. Yeah, and the baby's just passed out.
So funny, so funny. But like you said, like these babies are all different in their environment.
Hmm.
They'll adapt to it. If they're gonna sleep, they're gonna sleep. You
Yeah,
were
yeah, yeah.
mentioning earlier about communication elimination. What is that?
Elimination communication.
Elimination of communication, communication
I was like,
elimination.
communication elimination, my brain like twisted for a second. And yeah, so I learned about elimination communication when my son was a baby. And I'll tell you what, when I first heard it, I was a bit skeptical. I was like, what is this woman talking about? And it was a Slovakian mom, Juliana, if you're out there listening. She was a huge, huge mentor for me. I taught English as a second language when I was in Estonia, and she homeschooled both of her girls. And I forget how old they were now, 3 and 6. And so I would keep them 2 days a week and speak English with them as part of their homeschool curriculum. And I was pregnant with Ollie at the time. And so this was the first family that I ever knew that the kids were unvaccinated. They were very super Montessori style. She had home births and just this really strong Slovakian woman. And we still see her whenever we go to Estonia because they live in Estonia. And her daughters were just brilliant. I had spent a lot of time around kids, so I had seen that, and it was just such a to see how she mothered and to see how her children were so just who they were, how they embodied themselves was so just so cool to witness. And it really set me on a totally different path than I probably would have gone on. And there was another thing, if we wanted to talk about vaccinations, that spoke to me when she said it, which felt really good, but we can talk about that later. But she had all these little toilets around her house because her daughter was 3. And I remember thinking didn't like that, initially. I was like, why? Like, I feel like they should just learn to pee in the toilet. Like, I had this very stringent view of how it should be. And so I wasn't sure about that. It's just interesting how at one point we can judge a mother and then later be doing the same thing as her. And then after my son was born, he was having all these it seemed like his tummy was always upset, which now, of course, now that I know about the nervous system and I know about the vagus nerve and I understand that our automatic nervous system is in connection to our digestive system. So if we are dysregulated, it's not uncommon that we experience like breathing issues because it affects our lungs and our breathing, or heart issues because it impacts our heart rate, or digestion issues because the automatic nervous system is in charge of digestion. And so, of course, with me and my baby being dysregulated, now it makes perfect sense that he was having digestion issues. This is just something to think about when someone is wanting to alleviate the discomfort of their infant. And so anyway, she just showed me this posture. She had like a little Tupperware plastic bowl from her kitchen. So there was no like hat potty. There was no, anything like these really beautiful like things that you see now. She just grabbed a bowl from her kitchen and put my infant in this little squat position and just sat with him. And she had these big bosoms, just a full Slovakian woman that is well nourished, really nurturing, and had him resting against her bosoms and had his back there, and we're just chatting. She just has him sitting in that position, and I'm looking at her. He's looking, my baby Oliver is looking at me, and then all of a sudden he just pees in this bowl. And she's like, oh, there he goes. There he pees. And she was so proud of herself. It was so cute. It was this really cool moment. And she was like, here, take this bowl home with you and, do this. And this will help him. And sure enough, I mean, anytime he was acting fussy and like wiggly and he had some gas to get out, we would put him over this bowl or put him over the sink in this position, and he would just poop or pee right away. And it instantly brought him this relief. Like, he was so happy that we could assist him in these tummy troubles. So I would say if I had heard about elimination communication just as a way to like potty train and to not be in diapers for a long time, I probably, in my stress of new mothering, would not have really cared. Like, that wouldn't have been a priority. But because it was something that was clearly alleviating his discomfort, that was just such a huge benefit that we continued to do it. And yeah, by 2, he was totally out of diapers, like even at night. And so now looking back, I mean, my husband and I weekly say that is one of the main things we're so glad we committed to. And that was something that he could also do too. Like when he was hanging out with Ollie, it wasn't something that was just placed on the mother. And even my mom, I would show her, I was like, if his tummy seems like he's hurting, put him over the sink and do this. And my mom was down to do it. And then you just wash their butt, right there in the sink, and you don't even have to buy baby wipes. I mean, I had one package of baby wipes last me, forever, because I just kept it in the car. And of course, we still use throwaway diapers. We also had like a handful of washable diapers that we use. So some people are very like passionate elimination communication people, and they don't ever have, nappies or diapers. And we weren't like that. We were out of the house a lot. We were in a capital city of Europe. We walked around a lot. And at night, we always put him in a disposable diaper and things like this. So I think that elimination communication, it really can be something that you practice really stringently and religiously. And it can also be something that you just do super relaxed. Like if you see clearly that your baby is in discomfort, you can just put them in that little position and see what happens. Just be curious. That's really what I would recommend.
Wow, like I never it's interesting. I've never thought about this what I'm about to say, but like it's also the position of the body. So as you
Mm,
put your baby in that position where the knees are higher than the hips, supporting the digestive system to release, or
yep.
the bladder, yeah, like that's going to be more comfortable for them to go to the toilet.
Mm,
And that just made me think, like, just that as a practice is beautiful to support them if they need that support. And like you mentioned, your baby was looking like they were feeling uncomfortable, and being able to hold them in that position to fully release. So Araya growing up, we were in hot country, so she never had a nappy on. So she would just pee like outside, like she knew to pee outside,
yeah.
but she would just go
Hmm.
everywhere. So that for me was easy, very easy. But when we went to Canada, when she was like just before 2, she actually wore like diapers the most she's ever worn in her life, because she
Hmm.
didn't have the link to the toilet. So then we had to go again and make it more fun to go to sit in the toilet. But she was naturally curious. So again, it comes also down to the baby as well, of like what they're curious with. And but holding, I really like what you just shared about this, just putting them in the position. And it's something that I would definitely try the next time round, because the sooner that like I can get Araya, like I could get Araya out in nappies, the better. Because I was just thinking about what was on her skin, because she had difficulty with
Hmm.
the material from the washable nappies actually. So she
Yeah.
found her butt was better with these like bamboo nappies, but they were reusable. So I just wanted to get it off of her skin like as soon as possible, so she could have airflow there. And is there
Hmm.
anyone that you like look to for learning about this more? Is there anyone that you found like, oh, that's really good inspiration?
I think on Instagram, there's a woman, I bought these tiny undies. It's a brand called Tiny Undies, but she has a different Instagram profile. Like her Tiny Undies is her business.
Hmm.
But she has another profile for elimination communication, but there's lots of people online. So that was really what we did in infancy. But let's say you already have a toddler, and if you're home with your baby, of course, babies are naturally curious because wherever mom walks, they're little ducklings. They're just going to walk right behind you. Mom goes somewhere, baby goes somewhere. I remember, I used to use these menstrual cups, and I remember my son would just be like this, as I'm squatting on the toilet or in the shower taking out my menstrual cup. I mean, he was literally on his hands and knees, just like looking up at my vagina as I'm taking my menstrual cup out. And I'm thinking, how do these kids not know about a menstrual cycle when my child, I mean, even if I truly wanted privacy in
Yeah.
that moment, but it's like, well, what do I do? He's right here all the time. And so we just had a little toilet right next to my toilet. And so I never pressured him into being on it, but I was on the toilet. And so I was like, okay, there, now you can sit and try. Sometimes they would sit in their clothes, sometimes they would sit in their diapers and, do that. So even as they're older, just giving them the opportunity to do exactly what mom's doing because they're following her around anyway. And to see what Papa's doing because they're going to maybe follow him, not as common. And,
Only if you're lucky.
yeah, if you're lucky, they'll follow him into the toilet. But also, there's all kinds of really cool things for cool weather, which I'll be looking into because we live in Vermont, obviously.
Yeah.
But there's these also kind of pants. You can buy these wool pants that they're like chaps. And I think they're quite common in Japan for what we call elimination communication. But in Japan and these traditional societies, it's just what you do. And the chaps are like wool pants or cotton pants, and the butt and the part where the genitals are is open, as you could imagine a pair of chaps. So the baby can have socks on, the baby can have the wool pants on. And of course, if it was like an explosion, it would still get all over, but it leaves it open where the kid could just sit on the little toilet, or you could put them in this elimination communication pose, like the squat pose, even as a toddler over a toilet.
Like I
And
can
it's
just
just
imagine
open.
them. I need
Oh
to
my gosh,
see
yeah. There was
visual and
another kid
chat.
I babysat that did that. And it was just like the little butt cheeks would be out and everything else was covered in wool, but just the little butt was out. It was so cute.
Like
I
you
was like,
should get some
oh, look at his
kittens.
little
You can
booty.
both wear them.
Yeah. Yeah. Right. Like, where do I get a pair of those?
Exactly. So great. And you were just mentioning before, like how she put your baby over the bowl. So let's like guide this into what kind of stuff should we have on our shopping list and what is not necessary. And I feel like coming from you now, like this is your third, so you probably know what you've wasted your money on before.
Mm,
Like, oh my gosh,
yeah.
so much money on so much crap that I thought would help me and it never did.
Yeah, maybe it helped with my first two kids that we didn't have a whole lot of money, so we didn't really get like too much stuff. And I think also it helped that with the first kid we were in Europe, so you couldn't in Estonia. That's this culture of just like buying things on Amazon or buying things online. You probably know that being in Costa Rica now too. It just doesn't exist. Like here in America, we can just buy anything and it can be here in 2 days, and it's like $10. You know, it's not really, and it comes straight from China. So I think that in America, I know at least, maybe also Australia and the UK, I don't know, but it's so easy to just buy, 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 buy. And now more than ever, we're marketed everything through all our social channels. But yeah, I would say for this third baby, we have yet to buy anything. But I'm going to name off what I'm thinking of because I was just making a list the other day. And I wanted to switch from I have some reusable diapers that I saved from Ollie, that Slovakian mother, Juliana, that she actually handed me down from her two daughters. So I think like buying cloth diapers secondhand, which seems so weird for me to do with my firstborn, but now with the third baby, it's like, yeah, whatever. And you just don't even worry about it. And yeah, so I'm thinking now that I would like to invest in a few more cloth diapers that are wool on the outside. So they don't have this plastic or like waterproof covering, which of course can cause this reaction, which maybe you were experiencing with
I think
your daughter.
that's what happened with us. And then we were in Costa Rica and couldn't get our hands on anything.
Yeah. So I think that I'm going to get, like, I have on my list a few of these organic cotton inserts, which are basically just like a cloth diaper that you wouldn't sleep in it and you probably wouldn't go out to eat with them wearing it. But if you're just around the house, you can just wrap them in it. And then there's like a little clip. I forget what the clip is called, but I can find out really quick. But there's a little clip that clips the cloth on. And so all it is like an organic cotton flannel, or you could buy a wool one as well. And what's great about
Like
those
literally
is
just
if you have,
material you're talking about, just like wrapping the material,
it's
then putting
literally
it.
like a rectangle material, and there's a strip on the inside that's a little thicker than the outside. And then you can buy this little clip, and it's like what you would imagine what we saw in the old days in the movies, that like a safety pin on either side holding it together. It's actually like this little snap clip that just holds the whole thing together. And it's also great because I think it's important for kids to feel, these days diapers are so advanced that a child can pee 6, 7, 8 times and never feel wet.
Yeah, that's what I
And
was going
this
to say as
is
well. That's the cool part of having these material nappies is they start to notice what it's uncomfortable instead of it
it
being
doesn't,
like
yeah, they
sucked
feel
up
it.
straight away.
Yeah, I've had a mom tell me like their son who was already walking like peed in the shower, and he was shocked, like it startled him because he didn't realize that he peed, you know. And think about it, from an infant already seeing in the mirror, you know, in the bathroom, like, yep, I pee a million times a day. I forget what those
Wow.
snaps are called. I'm gonna look up nappy snaps. But yeah, so I have a few of those nappy snaps. And what's good about these cotton inserts is as they when your child is out of them, you use them for everything. I mean, they can be a burp cloth. They can be you wipe the counter really quick with them. Like they kind of transition into being just like this household
That's so funny.
cloth.
I have
Yeah.
mine now and I'm
Yeah.
like, I think I've used them for like my like when I'm on my period. I'm like, oh that.
I've used it. Yes. Yes. I've also used it for menstruating, like at night. I'm like, just put a little diaper thing in there. No worries. So yeah, they become like, it's not something that you invest in and then never use again. You can use it for all sorts of things.
I feel
I'll
like you
send you the
should be
link to
like
those snaps. You can put
you
it in
can
the
like
show
promote
notes.
them. You should like
Yeah.
start your own little business.
You get a little
You can
affiliate
use them
link
for
going.
washing your face or wiping your
Yeah,
butt on
truly.
your counter.
Yeah. Wipe your face, then wipe your baby's butt. So yeah, cleaning up spit ups. And so I would have that like set up right next to me. I'm imagining like I'm gonna be in bed and
Mm.
probably right next to me in a basket will be throwaway diapers, diaper inserts, those snaps, probably, a few changes of clothes, which I think that's another thing that I hear all the time, that they just have so many clothes that there's no way they could ever wear all of them. So I would say, yeah, maybe 7. I have one outfit that somebody gave me for Christmas, and maybe I'll have 7 changes of clothes, maybe. And they would just be natural material, so cotton or wool or some sort of net linen, maybe. Yeah, I also bought pacifiers for one of my kids. Mila had a pacifier, and I won't do that again this year. I think a haka is a nice thing to have, which is like this little suction thing that you can put on one breast. When you're breastfeeding on one side, it's not uncommon to start just leaking milk from the other side. And because I won't be tandem nursing, I'll probably have like a little haka to gather the breast milk so then I could give it to my toddlers if they want to try it, which I'm sure they will, and maybe freeze some. But I think there's also a huge, like the amount of women that pump, 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 pump out of this anxious state that maybe they won't have enough, or
Totally.
they need to have, yeah, they need to see their freezer full of milk. That's something to be aware of, I think, in terms of nervous system regulation. And I don't think that's necessary. I think in the first 40 days, baby should never be exposed to a bottle, a pacifier, any of those things, especially the first 40 days. And yeah, I remember meeting a mom once, and it's just interesting the disconnect that can happen. Like her baby was underweight, but then she said that her diet didn't impact the breast milk at all. And her baby was just asleep suckling on a pacifier. And so I thought, it was just an interesting thing to observe, that it's just so easy to put a pacifier in a baby's mouth. And I get it. I totally get it. I tried with both of my kids to give them pacifiers, and they just wouldn't take it. And now I don't even, now I'm a bit more, you might say, anti-passy. And so I don't see myself exposing this third baby to a pacifier for obvious reasons now to me that weren't so obvious then.
It's different
Yep.
when you're like in survival mode sometimes, isn't it? It's like I also tried Araya with it, and I was like, oh, it might just give me a break, but she hated it. So it was like a
Yeah,
lucky
yeah.
thing as well that she
Yeah.
didn't want it. But yeah,
Mm,
these things that we go to, and I when you said about the breast milk, it's like I wanted to see that freezer full. Like it helped me to feel safe, when actually it's like, why
mm.
don't I feel safe? Like, why do I feel like I need to hoard this milk instead of just being with her?
Yeah, and of course there could be something in your lineage. That could be like a family constellation session. I have a
Mm.
family constellation practitioner that I see, and I'll give you her info, because I would highly recommend any couple wanting to conceive or interested in healing lineage patterns to book a session with her, because I think that you might even see that maybe one of your family members was starving, or maybe an infant, one of the mothers in your lineage, their baby died because she wasn't fed enough, and that there could be something there that you're compensating for, and that is often can yeah, that can often be part of a lineage thing that is absolutely possible to put in right relationship,
Mm. I
and
just wrote
definitely recommend.
recently, like Araya, because it was International like Holocaust awareness, and Araya's lineage from her father's side, they experienced the Holocaust. And when I was pregnant with her, I had dreams. Like I've always had dreams that I was Jewish before I met them. So it's funny
Mm,
because timelines like don't really exist. So I wonder if like it was my ancestral line, or if it was Araya's coming through before she actually came into my body. But like when
mm.
I was pregnant, they came through so strong, and it's very interesting, and like a topic I absolutely love. So we will put her details in the show notes as well. And I'm thinking that we could just make, once you've made your list, your shopping list, maybe we can just put that underneath here too.
Yeah, yeah,
Because I know
totally. I have like a little Google sheet that I'm doing right now, so I can just
oh,
link
that
it,
would be great.
make it linkable, and I can link it here when I finish.
That would be
But yeah, I don't think much. I think change of clothes, diapers, wipes, running water, can be nice to have, or a well close by if you're super rural, which most people listening probably aren't. And yeah, carrier, a good carrier, which you can find secondhand. I'm going to actually get, I think, a new carrier for this baby because the one I used for Mila and Ollie was passed down from a woman that had two other kids. And
Hmm.
so cool to see what really passes down. And I remember also messaging a group of moms that I knew and saying, like, hey, I'm looking for this, 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 and this. I'll probably use it for 4 months and then I can give it right back to you. Does anybody have what I need? And all of them responded with something that they had that I could use. And they just put their name on it. And I just gave it back to them in a couple months because you go through some of those things that are so helpful, like a Solly baby wrap. That was really useful while I had an infant. But then as soon as both my babies got a little bit chunkier, it was better to have a more secure carrier that buckled and there was more like sturdiness there. So yeah, just knowing that borrowing is also such an option, just to have a group of moms that you message and ask if they have what you need or what you're looking for.
I love that so much, and it just, like, builds a community as well. You get to know these mothers.
But I will say you were still talking about things that you bought that you don't use. So that pacifier is one. I'm not going to buy that now. And I think that now seeing the stuff that wasn't available to me when I had an infant that I think now is really can be even maybe dangerous could be like surveillance technology, like having a camera on your baby. Like anybody can tap into those cameras if they're connected to Bluetooth or Wi Fi. So that's something that we're going to avoid. Like heart monitors and like all of these things that you actually put on your baby that are devices that measure their heart rate. And I can see where the fear is coming from. And so I think that if we're buying these gadgets, that's what I would run it through. I would run it through the system and say, am I buying this because it's going to help me and nurture our connection? Or am I buying this out of fear that something is going to go wrong? And so maybe you still buy whatever, but just to know, at least to have the awareness of, yeah, I'm buying this because I'm afraid something could go wrong. And maybe to get curious about that is a really impactful thing to do before the baby comes.
Oh, wow, that question is so powerful. And then you get to see actually what your fears are and whether you choose to or not. At least you can make a decision with knowing exactly where it's coming from.
Mm,
It's a powerful one.
absolutely.
We have been going for a long time, and I would
Yeah.
love to talk to you forever and ever and ever. Is there anything else that you wanna add before you share where people can find you and what you're offering? Because I'm sure there's gonna be some you're doing privates now, right? But it's gonna
Yeah.
change soon.
Everything will shift in May when Babe comes. But so by the time this comes out, who knows? But I do have, yeah, I wanted to say thank you so much for having me. It was so nice to have this chat for sure. I have a prenatal body wisdom program that I do one on one. It's birth and mother baby prep. So I work with mothers one on one. And the first class is all about the nervous system and learning to map and track your nervous system. I teach yoga also to a lot of women that are in their 40s or 50s. So they're perimenopausal and menopausal. And I realized, like, wow, actually, this class could be really powerful for more than just pregnant women. And it could also be great for men too, just to learn to map and track one's nervous system. So, understanding the evolution of the brain, the evolution of the nervous system, and learning to track where you're at on that scale. So, definitely recommend checking that out. You can find me on Instagram. I'm there at Rise in Bloom. And my website, www.riseinbloom.com. You can see my offerings there. You can also directly email me. I'm sure you'll put all of that in the show notes. And I work one on one. Yeah, mostly one on one. I'm happy to do the prenatal class as a group setting if there's a group of women that would like to do it in a group setting. And the nervous system class is also one on one. So it's really catered to an individual's where they're at individually and meeting them where they're at and giving them this info and feedback. And soon I'm in a training now for scar tissue remediation and pelvic floor work, working with Ellen Heed to learn this craft. So I'm super excited to offer that to women next year. And also just received a grant from the state of Vermont to enroll in a biodynamic craniosacral training. And that will also be a 2-year program. So I'm just slowly going to be learning a bit more hands-on work, working with infants that are having trouble nursing, working with birth imprints, working with trauma that may have been experienced during the birth, either with the infant, with the mother, with the mother's during the mother's birth, so in pregnancy and beyond. And yeah, excited to learn a bit more hands-on work and bringing that to the community. So if anybody's coming out to Vermont or would like to meet me somewhere warm, like Costa Rica, then yeah, I would love to offer that as well in the coming years. So that's sort of what I'm delving into these days.
So inspiring. Thank you so, so much. Sending love to you, to your family. Like, thank you for your time. As always, I love speaking to you, and I'll catch up with you on your journey via WhatsApp.
Hmm. I can't
Okay.
wait. See you later. Bye, hon.